Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Supporting All Team Members, Inclusive Recruitment and Enrollment Strategies. FIRST has partnered with Kids Included Together, KIT, to open more opportunities to youth with disabilities by providing inclusion training and support resources to FIRST teams. The goal of this partnership is to support FIRST teams in creating safe, positive, and inclusive environments and improving the overall FIRST experience for all youth. I'm your presenter, Catherine King. I have over 25 years of youth development experience in a variety of settings, including summer camp, after school, and teen programs. For the past 10 years, I've been providing coaching, training, and technical assistance to out-of-school time professionals in inclusive programs. As the Partnerships Director for KIT, I enjoy working closely with individuals, organizations, and systems to find the perfect blended learning approach to improve inclusive practices. I have a BS in Communications and Marketing from Virginia Tech and an MS in Recreation Administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My articles and research have been published in Camping Magazine, Journal of Park and Recreation Administration, and Discovery Magazine. And I've had the pleasure of working with FIRST for the last few years and enjoyed getting to experience my first World Championship in Detroit. This webinar will focus on steps you can take to be more inclusive during your team member recruitment and enrollment by establishing a foundation of communication and trust with families. You will be able to prepare mentors, volunteers, and environments to provide a high-quality FIRST experience for every youth. This webinar will guide you through practical checklists and resources that can be used to gather vital information about youth with disabilities and complex needs to ensure your team is better prepared from the very first day. By the end of the webinar today, you will be able to consider possible reasons why families may not share information about their child, identify 2 strategies to respectfully gather information from families, identify 4 categories of information that can guide your team to prepare accommodations prior to a youth's participation, and list 3 sources that can provide vital information to support youth with disabilities. The agenda is 1, communicating your commitment to inclusion, 2, inclusion statements, 3, why families might not share information, 4, gathering information about a youth, and 5, next steps. As we get started, I'd like for you to reflect on your team and where FIRST is in general. What are you currently doing or planning to do to create an inclusive team? Do you have specific strategies to recruit team members of all abilities and learn how best to support each member of your team? Take a minute here to reflect. From the minute a family member meets your team members, coaches, or mentors, your team sends messages to youth and families about inclusion. The first step in creating a welcoming and respectful team is to communicate your commitment to inclusion. Otherwise, you may not even get a chance to enroll a new team member because your team is perceived as unwelcoming. Everything from the language used in your marketing and print materials to how coaches and mentors approach individual youth sends a message. Some will send the message that your team is inclusive and youth with and without disabilities belong there. Other things may send the message that your team is not designed for youth of all abilities and that only some youth are welcome. A good first step is to spend some time looking at your posters, flyers, emails, and process for recruiting new team members. Your team should focus on communicating 3 key messages. Message 1, youth with and without disabilities belong here. Does your team have pictures of youth with and without disabilities on its recruitment flyers? Does your team reach out to classes and programs where youth with disabilities are present? Would a youth with a disability feel like they belong on your team? Message 2, staff and volunteers feel comfortable with all youth. Do all team leaders participate in training on inclusive best practices and group management techniques? Do coaches and mentors approach all youth with the same tone and enthusiasm? And then message 3, all families are welcome. Does your team have language that lets families of youth with disabilities know that they are welcome? Example, we welcome youth with and without disabilities. We make accommodations so that youth of all abilities have access to our team. Are families notified of their rights to request accommodations to policies, practices, and procedures to support their youth? For example, on the membership information, your team may have a statement that reads, "Our team strives to meet the needs of all participants. Please contact our coach at this phone number or this email to discuss accommodations or support." I wanted to share with you another more elaborate example of an inclusion statement. If your team doesn't already have an inclusion statement, you may want to use this as a starting point. Our team is committed to meaningfully including all youth and provide accommodations as needed. We respectfully ask parents or guardians to inform our coaches or mentors prior to the start of the program of any special circumstances which may affect your child's ability to participate. By providing information regarding strengths and needs of your child, we can prepare helpful accommodations which will better serve all youth on our team. Upon being informed of such circumstances, we may request a meeting to gather more information and to discuss the accommodations that can be created to successfully include your child. What I like about this statement is that the tone is not demanding or implying a child won't be allowed to participate in the program unless this is done. Instead, emphasis is placed on respectfully gathering information in order to provide a high-quality team experience. We all recognize that in a perfect world, we would have all the information we could possibly want or need on every participant. However, have you ever said, wow, we had no idea this kid had this level of need. We were totally unprepared for this youth to come to our team. When I talk to first coaches and mentors, this comment is almost always shared. Why do you think families may not share information about their child's disability or additional needs prior to joining a first team? Take a moment to reflect on what might keep a family from sharing this important information. There are several reasons why families are hesitant to share information. Let's talk about the most common ones. They are asked for unnecessary information sometimes. Does it run in the family? What caused his disability? How did this happen? They have been asked personal questions that imply judgment. Did you have amniocentesis when you were pregnant? Did you drink or take drugs when you were pregnant? They fear exclusion or rejection. And sometimes this is based on previous experience in programs. We're sorry, we don't take kids like yours, or yeah, we don't think we can handle that. Setting the right tone through representative materials and welcoming statements is a good first step. But you'll also need to make sure that you know what to ask when you are speaking with families about their youth. So let's spend some time talking about what information is needed, and then I'll follow up with what is not needed. So what are some things that you need to know? Any accommodations needed? Accommodations may be required for a youth to fully participate in your team and activities. You can ask questions like, can you tell me what accommodations have worked for your son in the past? Or what support will your child need to be successful on our team? Behavior supports. Understanding what motivates, upsets, or calms an individual can improve the way coaches and mentors respond to their behavior. You can ask a question like, when she gets angry, what works really well to calm her? Or, how do you encourage her at home? Individual interests. Knowing the likes and dislikes of an individual can improve the success of program planning. You can ask, what kinds of games does your daughter enjoy and love to do? Or, what are your son's interests? Unique strengths and challenges. Recognizing the abilities of individuals can improve readiness to offer support and plan learning activities that build on the youth's strengths. Can you tell me what your child is really good at? And can you tell me about the things that your daughter finds difficult? The last category is medical needs. Common medical needs are allergies, extreme sensitivity to the sun, asthma, or diabetes. You will want to know details of the medical plan and think ahead about what to do during competitions and travel when a parent may not be present. KIT has developed a resource for FIRST called 5 Questions to Ask Families. When I'm beginning to build trust with families, I found that these questions can be very gentle, but usually get at some very helpful information. Number 1, what does your child do that makes them smile? What does your child do that makes you smile? This sets the tone for a respectful conversation with families. Number 2, what does your child do that makes them smile? This helps you understand the youth's favorite activities, strengths, and reason why they chose to participate in FIRST. 3, what makes your child angry or sad? This lets you know what triggers there may be to behaviors so that you can anticipate them. 4, what does it look like when your child is angry or sad? This question will let you know what you will see if a youth is angry or sad, such as gestures or facial expressions or level of participation. And lastly, 5, what should we do when this happens? This lets you know what calming techniques will work best for the youth. We've also created a companion resource called 5 Questions for Youth. These are the same questions, but geared for the youth themselves. Especially with older participants, you may be able to gather this information by speaking with the young person directly. You can also use this during enrollment for all of your team members, remembering that not all disabilities will be visible or disclosed. Gathering information from all team members can be helpful as you plan for your season. KIT has created another resource that you can use to guide a more in-depth discussion. It's called the case-by-case checklist. You can find it on the FIRST website in the resource library. The checklist is divided into 6 categories: strengths and interests, areas of support, accommodations, communication supports, assistive technology, and medical needs. The case-by-case checklist is meant to be used for you to take notes on during a phone, video, or in-person meeting, not to be handed to a parent for them to fill out. This document is Americans with Disabilities Act compliant, so you can feel confident that you are legally allowed to ask these questions and gather this information. The important thing is that you don't base acceptance onto your team on the answers. If you want a more comprehensive understanding of a youth, it may be worth exploring other sources of information. There are several sources of information you can use to gather information about a youth. When possible, always include the youth themselves. Also, consider reaching out not just to parents and guardians, but other first coaches and volunteers, perhaps if they've participated in previous years. And if consent is provided by parents and guardians, you can reach out to school day teachers, therapists, and staff from other after-school or other out-of-school time programs. First teams often ask KIT what information is not needed. This slide lists information that is often asked, but that you really don't need to know in order to provide supports to help a youth be successful on your team. Families often share this information, which is sometimes helpful, but it is not needed. If families do share this information, you will want to be very careful to keep it confidential. You don't need to know the diagnosis. This one often raises eyebrows, but really, you don't need to know a youth is on the autism spectrum. What you need to know are all of the supports needed, what she likes to do, what she finds hard, and so forth. We don't want to make assumptions about what a youth needs based on a word. Every youth is different. You don't need to know the cause of a disability or the developmental age. Since it's best practice to put a youth with the same age peers, so for example, a youth's developmental age is irrelevant. If you have a 15-year-old, you wouldn't put that youth in with a first grader based on ability. You also don't need to know a youth's medical history or family's personal information. Our tip sheet, Gathering Information from Families, goes over all of the what you need to know and don't need to know points discussed in this webinar. This is also available in the first resource library. So, what are some next steps your team can take to respectfully gather information when enrolling new members? One thing is to review your team member onboarding process to see where you can easily incorporate the new tools we just reviewed. If you don't have a standard onboarding strategy, consider using the inclusion tools as a starting place. If you're not already doing so, consider scheduling a phone or video chat to have discussions or face-to-face meetings with parents or guardians and the youth prior to the starting date. Have the 5 questions or case-by-case checklist handy to help guide the conversations. And always recognize that additional information can also be requested after enrollment and throughout the season. As we come to the end of this webinar, let's take a moment to think about at least one strategy from this webinar you might implement during recruitment and enrollment to better support team members of all abilities. Just a reminder that all of the tools referenced in this webinar today can be found on the FIRST website. We also have additional resources not mentioned in this webinar. So go to the FIRST website and you can get the case-by-case checklist, Gathering Information from Families tip sheet, 5 questions to ask families, and 5 questions to ask youth. And then check out Kit's webinar, Creating a Sense of Belonging for Youth with Autism Spectrum Disorder. There's also 2 other resources, Inspiring Youth Voice Training and Inspiring Success Training for coaches and mentors. Finally, if you have any questions or want additional information about how FIRST is supporting team members of all abilities, you can check out this website or contact FIRST at diversity@firstinspires.org.